Let's take a moment and comment more directly on the social scientific aspect now that we've walked through the historical account of the third motif in the second episode. We saw that the powers of this world in Israel were scandalized at Jesus 7 times in Mark's account. Every time Jesus diffused their scandal using varying tactics to do so. Jesus' diffusion subverts the scandalous meaning expected of the second episode of the pattern of myth culture and inverts the myth sequence. While Jesus always diffuses the scandals, and Jesus himself never participates in the scandals himself, Israel's leaders are increasingly scandalized, enraged at Jesus anyway, escalating into an intense resentment, a harbored scandal, hatred, and desire to murder Jesus. And they fulfill the expected pattern of myth culture, holding their council together as to how to destroy Jesus. Not unlike the councils we read about in the combat myths we explored earlier. Jesus' diffusionary behavior in response both shows that Jesus alone is not mythological or myth cultural here. He also models for us how we should behave when faced with others being scandalized at us. Jesus has modeled it here in action. In the next motif, Jesus will teach on diffusion of scandal, explaining how to go about it in response to scandal. But here, in terms of his actions, Jesus utilizes 5 methods to diffuse the scandal of the powers, spiritual and physical, the evil spirits, and the religio-political groups. All of these 5 methods should have diffused their scandal, and they did to some extent, but the scandal was harbored and escalated in the hearts of the world's powers that follow the pattern of myth culture. They inexorably follow it. Only God can deliver them, and they are unwilling to come to Jesus to be delivered. But the 5 methods Jesus uses to diffuse scandal are, firstly, that Jesus refers to his authoritative word in moments of scandal, the Holy Scriptures, the Law of Moses, the prophets and writings that make up the Old Testament canon, and Jesus teaches from the basis of his word with great authority. So that's one strategy that we saw Jesus uses in these situations of scandal. Second method Jesus employs is performing mighty divine miracles of exorcism and healing, thereby demonstrating his divine identity and authority. And this is a diffusionary method as well, because it shows who he is and that he has the authority to do the things that he's doing. Thirdly, Jesus practices privacy, authoritatively commanding both exorcise demons and healed people not to reveal his identity, which no doubt would fuel further scandal. Fourthly, Jesus employs logical reasoning, always based on the ultimate final authority of the Scriptures, which always helps to dispel the irrational, unbiblical scandal of the hypocritical religio-political leaders who are always claiming to follow God's word but never actually doing it. But Jesus reasons logically from the Scriptures to diffuse that. And the 5th strategy we saw Jesus use is creating space, maintaining social distance, something we're familiar with in another sense these days, though today social distance is for purely mythological reasons, based on lies and deceptions. But Jesus means social distancing in the true sense of how walking away, as our parents taught us in our school years, can prevent further conflict, right? Somebody wants to fight you, someone's coming after you at school, in the schoolyard, walk away. Create some distance. Jesus practiced this. He would stay on the move and withdraw to wilderness locations when the opposition from the myth culture grew tense. And we saw him doing that. So those are the 5 ways we just saw that Jesus diffuses scandal of the myth cultural people around him. Nevertheless, the evil spirits and world leaders continue in the expected pattern of myth culture. They began in the default state of all fallen, sinful humanity, which is sameness, as we saw last time in the first episode. Sameness directed at John the Baptist and Jesus, viewing Jesus as a rival double for power and control. And we've now seen in the 3rd motif, which begins the 2nd episode, that sameness progressed into scandal, perceiving Jesus as a model obstacle to their desire. A desire which Jesus does not share with them, though they wrongly think Jesus shares their desire for controlling Israel in the world. Jesus is actually imitating his Father's desire, not their desire for world domination. Jesus demonstrated that last time as he rejected Satan's offers to him in the desert, and he continues to demonstrate it here. The world's leaders have put John in prison, but that won't be enough for Jesus. They're determined to discredit and kill Jesus. Jesus, however, is not in a state of sameness with the world's powers. Jesus is distinctive and is not now in a state of scandal with the world's powers. Sorry about that loud truck. The leaders of Israel, the world's leaders, are not a model obstacle to Jesus' desire, which is not the world's desire, but his Father's desire. Jesus' desire, in keeping with his Father's will for him, is to lay down his life as a ransom for many, as we'll see more and more as we continue through the gospel account. Jesus' desire is not like the world's desire. The world's desire is to sacrifice others to satisfy their own desires. That's not Jesus' desire, that's the myth's desire, and we see that the leaders of Israel are engaged in that desire, but not Jesus. And we'll continue to track that as we continue. But I mentioned the first episode as well, that as Jesus' pattern inverts and subverts myth culture's pattern, he ends up performing a reversal of the episodes of the pattern of myth culture as well. So in the first episode, Jesus' distinction not only undermined myth's sameness, but myth's segregation as well, which is the last episode of myth. Here in the second episode, we can see that Jesus' diffusion not only undermines myth's scandal, which is the expected second episode of myth, but undermines myth's satiation as well, the fifth episode of myth's pattern. As we've learnt in myth, the world's powers and mythological mobs sate themselves. They satisfy themselves on the corpse of the scapegoat, satisfying their evil desires. But already here in the second episode of Jesus' pattern, just in the third motif, just in this first motif of this second episode, Jesus is satisfying the deeper desires of the people. Despite constant opposition from demons and religio-political leaders, Jesus goes about unhindered, exercising, healing, teaching, leading, and comforting the people of Israel. So Jesus preemptively provides a sort of satiation of desire, a satisfaction, that the culture's myth pattern can never offer. Jesus freely satisfies the deepest desires of their souls, their hearts, minds, and bodies. And so doing, Jesus undermines the very purpose of the pattern of myth culture. For those who come to Jesus in faith-believing, the myth culture no longer offers anything of value. Their desires are more than satisfied in Jesus alone. And Jesus satisfies the desires of men's hearts far better than the lies and violence of myth culture can ever satisfy.